All right, good morning again, everybody. My name's Tom Peck. I'm the Chief Information Digital Officer at Sysco. I like to say the other Sysco with the S, the Sysco Foods Company. We're a $82 billion food distribution company. There's a great chance when you go out to dinner, you eat at a hotel, or you go to like Fenway Park as an example, you're eating food that flows through our supply chain. So I run technology for our company, including everything data, e-commerce, AI, and we have a great panel, and we have full attendance.
Yes.
And we've got the, yes. And we had some great nominations for the CIO Award, and congratulations to all the nominees, all the finalists, but I'm honored, and I think we're honored. We have Monica on our panel, the winners, so thrilled to have you here as well, so thank you. So before we introduce the panelists, just a couple opening remarks from me. I've been at this event a couple years now, and I can't think of a better topic around AI than education. And we spend a lot of time talking about the what. What do we need to do? And we kind of know the why, but the how. We don't spend enough time on the how. And I'm not talking the technical how. A lot of the how is the creating the buy-in, creating the understanding, helping people understand what does it mean, the culture, the skills, the behaviors, and setting expectations. How many of you have had a business partner, a business leader, a board member who says, I want an AI, or I want an agent, and they don't really know what that means. They just feel left out if they don't have one, right? And we've got to educate them and set expectations, and that's what this panel's about. We're gonna talk you through some of those best practices, and hopefully there's a nugget of information that you can all take home, and we'll have a couple questions at the end as well. So let's introduce our panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves, but it's a great group. Three very great leaders here with very different experiences, which makes this board or this panel even more interesting. But Monica, you want to start?
Sure, it's a pleasure being here. And so I run technology for Liberty Mutual. We are in 29 countries around the world. Prior to Liberty Mutual, I spent 18 years in General Electric, where I was both in manufacturing and financial services. So when I hear about legacy data now being called heritage data, I love that. I'm going to use it, but I'm thrilled to be here.
Great, thank you for being here. Reshmi.
Firstly, very excited to be here and sharing this panel with such an accomplished set of people. Monica, congrats again. My name is Reshmi Ramachandran, and I lead go-to-market strategy and partnerships at Cprime. Cprime is a 25-year-old company, and what we really do is we're a consultancy that helps customers really change their operating model, and we've done it through every tech super cycle. So in the age of AI, it's really about how do you bring in assets across, thinking differently, behavioral changes, mediums, machines, and how do we make those outcomes that make a dramatic change to companies and how they compete in this world of AI.
Thank you. And Melissa, sorry.
Hi there, Melissa Swift. I am the founder and CEO of Anthrome Insight, and we're a company that helps with personal and organizational effectiveness in kind of a wild and very tech-inflected world of work. So all of these issues about how do we thread this AI strand into what is kind of a messy friendship bracelet, and you can see I'm into bracelet metaphors here, is very much something that we work on. I've had a long consulting career leading transformation practices at places like Korn Ferry, Mercer, and Capgemini, and I'm super excited to be out in entrepreneurial space and to be at what I think is my 5th CIO Symposium. We love this, and it's great to be with people like Monica. Congratulations.
All right. Thank you, ladies. So let's start with a very first kind of fundamental question about what AI is. And that sounds like a super simple question, but it means different things to different people. I work for a great big company, and like many of us, like I said earlier, everybody wants an agent or wants AI, but what does that really mean? We're not going to talk so much about hype. AI can sometimes be a panacea. We heard earlier this morning it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but part of education is helping our leaders and our business partners understand what is AI in the most simplistic terms, helping them understand. And what I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists, very quickly, what are they doing with AI, and how do they break it down to its very fundamental, most simplistic ways to understand? And then we'll dive a little bit deeper into cultures and obstacles and learnings. But Monica, you want to go first? What is AI to Liberty Mutual?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, property and casualty insurance, we both have consumer products as well as commercial products. And the one piece that may be interesting to all of you is we don't actually know the cost of goods sold when we sell our product, right? If you have an insurance policy you buy in January for an automobile, simple, and you actually file a claim in December, and there's price inflation, there's labor, parts, all kinds of supply chain issues that we know happen today, and so that price has changed. So for us, AI is not something that emerged out of the woodwork in November of 22. We have been doing ML and so much more for years. However, the conversation did shift in 23. And so the way we're talking about it, to make it simple, is we say, okay, ML, et cetera, predicts, Gen AI creates, and agentic AI acts. And so now how do we thread those things together to create value in both the defensive and offensive side, which means defensive, we heard about cyber and protection, offensive, which is opportunity, new products, new ways to serve customers.
I think that's great. Predicts,
Yeah.
creates, and acts and preempts. I mean, at its most simplistic form, that is the evolution of AI, right? And so many of our business leaders and partners get those three confused. And probably a lot of software companies out there are confusing them too, right? Buy our new product, it has the new version of AI.
And it will solve everything.
And it will solve everything, right? So fundamentally, understanding those differences are so important in breaking it down for everybody. Predict, create, and act and preempt. Those are great examples. Thank you. Reshmi, you're in the services world. How do you break it down in simplistic terms, and what are you thinking about?
No, I love the way Monica defined it too, right? So we've been moving from predictive AI to generative AI to now agentic AI. And what does this really mean? With every version of AI, the way I look at it is I think we are advancing human-machine collaboration. That's where it's heading towards, right? So before it was, hey, here is the best tool for you to do a piece of work. Thank you. Here is the best tool for you to do a piece of work, to tell me what you want to do, and I will do it for you in the best possible way, driving the best outcome for you, given everything else that needs to be done, right? So we're moving from, take the example of a CRM system, right? I can give you the best CRM tool to, say, manage your customers today, but think of an agent that actually takes over customer relationship management for you. It's going to go in, it's going to manage relationships, send out follow emails, book up your next meetings, look at who you're meeting with, curate the experience in a way that's so individualistic to the company, to the person you're going to meet. That's the kind of evolution that we're seeing with AI.
Yep, that's great. Thank you for that. Melissa, same question.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about crows. So folks may know that crows actually use tools, right? They're pretty sophisticated. They will use a stick. And what's interesting is recent research shows that crows actually prefer using that stick, using technology, than to not using technology to do the same task. And I think this is a really neat model for humans, right? When we get it right, it's more fun to do something with technology, right? Because the results are better than not. So at heart, AI is just that. It is just a really good stick, right? And it's moving from being analytical stick to stick that can create things, to stick that can actually maybe get out ahead of things a little bit. But at the end of the day, it has to be that tool that you derive pleasure from using, just like the crows actually apparently emotionally show that they like using the stick. And when that's not happening, right, that's where we get hung up. And I think that's where we'll get into the interesting discussion, right, about what's gumming up the process.
Yep, thank you. As a panel moderator, I try to remind myself sometimes that I'm supposed to be moderating, but every now and then I want to offer a thought as well. And I think there were some great thoughts there, and I think when we break it down into its most fundamental definition and try to teach people what it is and what you can do with it. Sometimes it prompts a discussion around, is AI a strategy? And I don't want to go there per se, but AI is a tool within a business strategy, and you got to lead with business. And I often push back on my business partners, as I'm sure you all do too. What business problem are we trying to solve? And let's pivot a little bit into culture. And Melissa, I'm going to come back to you in a moment here, but culture is a big part of driving education, adoption. Culture is a set of norms and values and behaviors that become innate and natural within an organization. Culture can be good, it can be bad. The culture that embraces AI isn't always necessarily great if there's not an understanding of what it is. And we've probably all seen good culture and bad culture in different forms. But within the context of AI, Melissa, back to you. Do you see major cultural differences between orgs where AI culture is building more quickly versus more slowly?
Yeah, I mean, I do not believe that AI thrives in highly authoritarian top-down environments. Right? I think the way that people pick it up and engage with it is through play. Right? If you think about Erminia Ibarra, is a professor at Harvard who, sorry, said the H word, who...
Did you say Harvard? No? Strike that from the record.
But she studies how people's identities change. And she says the way that people's identities change is that it's almost like being kids. When you try on, I'm a superhero, I'm a firefighter, whatever, right? We play with our identities. We also learn technology by playing with it, right? Or think about, that guy in your neighborhood who was always tinkering with his car. He knew a lot about cars because he tinkered with it. And what happens when you try to do a super top-down, authoritarian, we're all going to use AI now sort of thing, is people aren't playing with it. People aren't tinkering with it. And they're not really adopting it. So when I think about an AI-friendly culture, it's got those guardrails that the last panel was talking about, because I think that word guardrails is really important. It's not anarchic, but it's also not authoritarian. And you have to kind of hit that sweet spot, and that's where an adoption really kind of starts going on the flywheel.
Yeah, I think that's great. We'll talk a little bit more about governance here shortly, but yeah, it's not top down. How do you create that culture where everybody feels like they own the solutioning, the ideation? Great call out. And Reshmi, back over to you. What have you seen out there in culture, good and bad, and any thoughts for the group out here?
Sure. So especially in my role on the partnership side, right, we see a lot of small companies, startups that are AI native, right? These companies are small. They're like less than 20 people, but they are generating $3, $4, $5 million in revenue per employee, right? Just as a comparison, our traditional SaaS companies do about 300 million. So what are these companies doing so differently that takes them and able to create the scale of efficiency that they are doing today, right? I think these companies are fundamentally using AI differently. It is so core to their purpose. It is not something that they have as, a tool to make a process or a part of the organization more efficient, but it is so core to how they operate, and it's part of their operating model, right? Just touching on, what Melissa said, right? Tinker around with it, make it part of the organization, because when you really talk about that operating model change, what does that really involve, right? It's about redefining, rethinking how decisions are being made. It's about, rewiring and re-architecting data and workflows. And it's about reconfiguring roles and responsibilities. And that can never be done in isolation in an organization. It has to transcend teams and people and different people with different expertise that come in. Like when we consult with companies, right, we often tell them, never do prompt engineering in isolation. It's not an isolated job. It is actually a cross-functional skill, right? You get some of your best prompts from marketing folks or leaders in HR, because that's where the context is. That's where the nuances come into play, and that's what makes the biggest difference when you talk about, the change and the culture that drives the change.
Yeah, great call out. How many of us have been in discussions or maybe even doing job descriptions for prompt engineers, or how many of you have a chief AI officer? And personally, I think it's everybody's job, and you want to incubate a lot of those ideas, federate it, decentralize it as best you can with the guardrails and governance. But you're hearing some themes about culture is top-down visionary direction, but bottoms-up, incubating it. But, Monica, on culture, go fast, go slow. And I had the privilege of reading your award nomination, and you wrote, and I quote, "But few in the company had an appetite to move forward," end quote. Okay, how many of you get caught in that move fast, move slow? Well, move fast, but I just want it done tomorrow, right? This is quandary we get into, but how did you mobilize people? How did you get them on board? At what speed, at what pace? How did you go about that?
Yeah. Yes, I have several of those experiences, and I'm sure we all do. And I do think it's a point that Melissa made earlier about culture. I would say, what kind of culture does your organization have, and subcultures? Because it's not all the same. And we experienced that my team that sits in China operates differently than my team that operates in India or in Seattle. And so what we try to orient is this top-down perspective. I call it the house view. What's the house view on how we're going and approaching Gen AI and the deployment and activation of it? And then from there, how do you then make it local so that it becomes owned and activated by those team members? So that's one piece around moving forward. The other piece is create clarity. So on the topic of Gen AI, what we've done is we've said house view is we're going to approach this in 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is everyday AI, and we've launched Liberty GPT within 2 weeks of it being available through our Microsoft partnership in March of 2023. And since then, we've been doing training and rolling it out, and we say everyday AI, just use it. Just get in there. To the points that you both are making, you have to develop an intuition about what it can and cannot do. There's not enough training that I'm going to provide that is going to express it can hallucinate, it can do this, it can do that. You actually have to have an intuition. And when you do, you will start to have flight of imagination about what it can do for my team, for my role. So everyday AI is pillar 1. Pillar 2 is use case orientation. And that's when you go from like this top down, we need to use it, to this bottoms up use case. What are the use cases that will actually drive value, outcomes, and oriented to the value, not just chasing shiny things? There is room for experimentation, but you have to have some kind of intent. And then the third piece, which I think is harder for generally cultures to embrace because it requires you to change, is what we're calling rewiring with AI. And that is a lot harder to do. That requires a lot more cultural change. But maybe just to kind of put a pin in it, it is really contextualized to the teams. And do you have a pulse on what that team is, what their change curve looks like, how fast do they move through that, and then do you have the right mechanisms by which you approach that team? You can have a house view, but you've got to localize it.
Yeah, great thoughts. At Sysco, we have a culture of bottoms-up ideation, trying to meet kind of the top-down internal, external business outcomes we're trying to derive. We've been using more traditional AI to route trucks, to try to do faster pick routes in a warehouse, things of that nature. Who would have thought that there's 25 different types of bacon out there? So we're using generative AI to generate training material and videos, and agentic to help drive the conversation, the sales pitch, the call plans, and the next best actions. And culturally, what we're doing is we ideate in the typical 2x2 matrix, just plotting, benefit and cost, and how easy it is to implement change management. But you really got to get the organization, incubating. You heard experimentation. You heard about sandboxes and guardrails. So thank you for the cultural thoughts. Let's pivot to obstacles here. And Reshmi, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but lots of obstacles out there, cost prohibitive, indecision around which tool, build versus buy, data quality. One of the big obstacles I think that I have is setting expectations, tempering people's enthusiasm with how hard or easy it is to do things. So education is the theme of this panel. So let's talk about how you
educate on obstacles and overcome some of those obstacles. But Reshmi, you probably have a few that you've seen and a few recommendations. Why don't we start with you?
Definitely, and you stole my point, Tom.
Oh, sorry.
So I think when you talk about obstacles, right, the obstacle is not really the tech. I think it's the expectation gap that really exists, right? There is an overestimate on what AI can do sometimes right out of the box. And at the same time, there is also an underestimation in terms of what it really takes to make that AI optimal and the work that it takes to do the training, to do the rethinking, and everything that's involved in making sure it behaves in a way and operates in a way that's desired. So I'll take a quick example. I read about this a few weeks back, and I thought it was quite fascinating. We all know IKEA. IKEA is always in the news for being extremely innovative, adopting technology products really quickly and driving great results. This is with respect to an AI implementation they did. So they were looking at their customer service management, and they used AI, which helped them take over about 50% of the queries that their call center agents were getting off. And what that meant was they had about 8,500 employees now who were free to do something else, right? So instead of making those 8,500 employees redundant, IKEA actually retrained those customer service agents and made them design consultants. And in the process, the next year, they generated an additional $1.4 billion in revenue, right? Why I find this case study so interesting is what they really did was they didn't use AI just to solve a call center optimization problem, right? They actually used it as a value creation exercise. They were actually able to drive the value, take it to another part of the business where they used it to generate revenue. So, I mean, if you really look at it, right, what they also got right is they actually put in the work to retrain these people. Mm-hmm. You take customer service agents, they've got the foundational knowledge about things that are going wrong, the things that customers often complain about. Where are the problem children hiding, right? You take that native knowledge and then you further give them, upskill them on, let's say, design thinking, consultative selling, making them really, really good design consultants. And, lastly, I think, what they did was not like a tech-forward approach. It was more of an experience-forward approach, right? So the obstacle that they might have faced, let's say, from their internal employees that might have resisted the change, they really empowered these people to start doing higher value jobs, right? Getting more involved in the process. It did take them a year, but they were really able to see the results at the end of it. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty fascinating case study that talks about obstacles.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to amplify something you said, which I think is really powerful, how many of you up here and out there know colleagues and employees who are afraid of AI because it thinks it's going to put them out of a job, right? That gets into culture, it gets into trust. Words matter. We've even changed some of our terminology from AI-powered to AI-enabled, and that's why you see words like co-pilot and assistant and things like that. But usually important part of education and culture as well. Monica, over to you. Skills. I run a big company, big department like you do. I'm still looking for my number one AI person in my company. I don't know who he or she is, to be honest. But what do you think about skills as an obstacle, and can they be taught in an AI world, or are they just innate, or are you born with them?
Well, I think skills is a bigger conversation. We've been pivoting towards skills since about 2 years ago when we started thinking about where's the world going, and we created this transformation roadmap that said, okay, we are going to be advancing to this rewired world with AI, and we forecasted 2030 plus. Clearly, we missed a beat on that. However, what we started talking about was, well, what would it take to be successful? What do we need to do? How can we get ready? What's our readiness level? And it started with people. And now we're a very purpose-oriented company. It's very natural for us to ask the question of people and teams. And so we started saying, well, what skills do we have today? And we actually didn't have a good bank of skills. So what we did have was lots of roles, lots of different roles with lots of different names that kind of did the same thing and didn't do the same thing. So we went after this from a simplification perspective. We reduced the variation of roles. So this is a data cleanup process. We simplified roles by over 150%. So now we have 6 job families, we have 30 roles, and within each role, there's a description of all the skills that you have. Then we did an assessment of all our people, and we had everybody have a skills profile. From there, we understood what the gaps were, and now we've been working on training people on those gaps. What we're not doing is jumping on headlines. So when things say like, oh, prompt engineering is a new job, we actually break that down and go back to our skills library and say, what skills actually create this capability? And so that's how we're orienting it. So to say AI skills, what does that even mean? Break it down. I like fine-grained detail because that's where the truth lies. And therefore, you don't make mistakes by jumping on headlines and sending your team off on a path. So what we're doing now is we're looking at what are the capabilities we need in the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Do we have the training? Are people taking the training? And then do we have a path for them to actually practice? So our organization, we average about 16 to 20 hours per employee in tech of training per year. And when we benchmark that, we're kind of average, but I don't know that that's enough. So now we're looking into how do we create capacity for that so we can develop the skills, so that we have the capabilities, so that we have the readiness level to actually capture the opportunity, rather than the other way around, which is like, we need AI skills, let's go do this certification, and then you're kind of like, well, how do I apply it? And then as an employee, we say, okay, now you as an individual, what is your career path? Rather than orienting it to this ladder, how do we now create a jungle gym of opportunities and actually maximize value for the employee by saying, you now have new opportunities because we're oriented towards a skills framework. So it's an evolution, and I think we need to think long term and not be too focused on this headline that we just read. You got to look for patterns.
Yeah, I love the answer. I almost want to have you repeat the answer, and that way I can take notes this time.
We can talk later.
But skills profile, capabilities, most of us hate doing job architecture and job profiles that we just want to get stuff done,
Yeah.
but you can't skip the step of making sure you've got the capabilities, and the training and the opportunity to experiment is usually important. So Melissa, I love this question, and I have to be careful how I word it, but what is the biggest roadblock to AI adoption that orgs are not yet thinking about?
Well, I think, and this is going to build on some themes that you've been hearing from these guys, right? It's not knowing the underlying work. So if you think about it, right, I love some of what you guys have been talking about kind of decomposing and recomposing the skills, right? Rewriting job descriptions, like really getting into that nitty gritty. That really resonates for me. But to do that work, you have to actually understand the work that people do. And so the dirty little secret is, okay, I want to get, AI doing, this work, that work. Well, what is the actual work the human beings that you employ do right now? How do they do it? How do teams divide up the work? Do leaders understand the work that their people are doing? I mean, it's fascinating, and working in the digital transformation space for a long time, this comes up over and over and over, that we want to create this wonderful space for these wonderful technologies, but we don't know what the people do. And the people not knowing what the people do, and the people not knowing what each other do, right? A lot of times laterally, that's a big issue. We think, oh, we have these silos and we can't implement AI because of these silos. Yeah, that's a human problem. That is, to the point, that is not a tech problem. And until we're willing to kind of really get in there and engage with that nitty-gritty, day-to-day reality of what people do all day, which I think sometimes we have a willful blind spot about. I think sometimes we don't want to know what people are doing because it starts to open other questions, right? And you can get to some of those great IKEA-type outcomes when you actually look the work in the face, but we don't often look the work in the face. And I think that, for me, is the biggest obstacle that I see over and over. Organizations, very different types of industries, right? It's just that inability to kind of go eye to eye and say, okay, that's the work, and a certain proportion of it's a little weird. And then what are we going to do?
Yeah, the other thing, I don't know what you all think. I'm going off script here a little bit. I apologize. But when you think about skills and training, one of the things that I've been very, very deliberate and sensitive about is about avoiding a varsity versus a junior varsity, or a privileged versus unprivileged kind of culture within the company, where if you're on the AI team, you're important, and if you're on the, what do we call it now, heritage team, I think I'm a heritage CIO, but you know, you're on the varsity or the junior varsity, or you're on the new ERP project team, or you're supporting the legacy heritage team. And again, going off script here a little bit, but have you seen that, or any kind of best practices, or is it not a concern at all?
I've been deliberately saying that's not what we do, and deliberately having the conversations with the organization that it's also not a tech thing.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important, that you don't create this delineation between we got this, we're doing it, and you don't have it, you're not doing it. The truth is, this is an incredible inflection point in technology. You go back to these moments in time. There's an awesome picture out there, 1900s, of New York City on Easter morning. We were talking about this at dinner last night. And there's a picture, and it's all horses pulling carriages, and there's one automobile. And then you fast forward 13 years, same Easter morning, Fifth Avenue, New York City. It's all automobiles, and there's one horse pulling a carriage. I don't want us to be the horse pulling the carriage, point one. Point two, this isn't going to take 13 years, right? Exponential inflection point here. So you cannot create silos. They will kill you. And so I think your point about varsity and junior varsity, if you're playing that game and you're approaching it that way, you got to ask yourself, what is it about your culture? Because you got to go to the root cause, right? What is it about your culture that led you there? And then work backwards to fix it.
Yep.
And I'll just chime in, because I heartily agree. And I've seen exactly what you're describing across, again, a number of large organizations. And the point I want to make is both groups end up hating their lives, right? Like, the cool kids, the supposedly cool kids with the fun technology, often don't get the right decision rights. They're still dealing with heritage issues. It's not like they escaped the heritage stuff. And everybody hates them. Right? So the group you would think is having fun isn't having fun either, and can't be productive on that basis. And then the other group obviously, you know, feels slighted. So you've created, I think, a lose-lose with those two groups. I think the reality is we are all dealing with the legacies and the heritage of the past, and we are all rocketing into the future at the same time. And when you create a model that really acknowledges that, I think that's where you get like that high-performing culture, to be honest.
Yeah. No, it's about providing access, I think, right? Like you said, even within technology teams, you have legacy technology teams that are working on something different, and you have the cool kids who are developing all the new stuff, right? So I think it's also about being very specific and providing learning paths and meeting folks where they are today, right? Not everybody can start at the same point, and not everybody wants to get to the same point. So being able to very prescriptively define that, I think, is helpful, is a first step in actually giving people the opportunity and the option to go figure this out, right? I mean, all of us do this, I'm sure, in all the companies, is, you know, when you do AI councils too, it's usually cross-functional. You're having folks from across teams. Everybody has the impetus to want to learn and know more and contribute to the discussion, because it impacts your everyday work. It's not just a technology decision. It's something that implicates everything that each of these different teams do. So I think just opening it up that way will make a huge difference.
Great answers. Before we take a couple questions from the audience, I have two rapid-fire questions for the panel here. One or two words, maybe three, really quick answers. I know we talked about three. I'm going to surprise you with two of the three, though, for purposes of time. Single biggest piece of advice for those in the audience.
Yeah, that was
Melissa, you want to go first? And or whoever.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, space for
One or
play.
two words.
Oh, sorry.
One or two words.
That's three.
Rapid fire.
Play.
Play. Like it.
Biggest advice, AI is a leadership skill.
Yeah. Biggest advice on all of this, I would say you have to scale trust.
Focus on business outcomes. Okay, one more. We're going to go back this way. What's the one or two words that express your current feeling about AI? How do you feel?
Oh, enthusiastic.
Who believes her? Does anybody believe that? I don't know. I looked at her face when she said that, and I don't know. So enthusiastic. All right, Reshmi.
I think it's transformational momentum. We're building to it.
Cautiously optimistic.
That's a good one, cautiously optimistic. I'm going to use the word anxious. I'm a little anxious, too fast, too slow. But anyway, ladies, thank you. That was some great discussion. Hopefully there were some nuggets of information out there. Anybody have questions for our panelists? We've got a few minutes here. Don't be shy.
We've said it all.
There's over here.
I can talk loud. Oh. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much for lending your time today. This is very helpful. I'm walking away with change management at heart. So just very briefly, how do you penetrate the detractors in change management given the landscape that we're all playing in right now?
Maybe I'll start real quick and then I'll pass it over to you, Melissa. I would say my current hypothesis on resistance to change, it's that it's due to uncertainty. And so the way we're approaching it is, how do you have those top 3 uncertain moments and meeting that group or that team where they're at? And the biggest one that we get in our organization through surveys, roundtables, et cetera, is what's going to happen to my job. Mm-hmm. And so what we've been talking about is, let's reorient a conversation and not say what's happening to the job, but what's happening to the tasks within that. And yes, some of those tasks will be more efficient if we do it this way, but there will be other opportunities there. And the IKEA case study is an example, and so there's the value creation conversation.
Yeah, and I'll just build on that because I think there's a lot of wisdom there in attacking the uncertainty. And I'll just also say, work is really messy right now, guys. The world is messy. Work is messy. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge that you are adding one more thing to all the things, right? If you try to treat this in isolation, we got this shiny object, we're super excited, and they're like, well, I have 37 dirty objects on my plate already, so thank you for that, right? The change management conversation isn't going to be successful. It's got to be contextualized to how challenging it is to get anything done right now, and then optimistic about the potential for AI to help, right, task by task.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because there is this unsaid pressure about everybody needing to know everything about AI when you're in the room and you're trying to make the decisions. And what surprisingly happens is that actually pushes you more into a shell rather than being more curious about it. So I think that is probably what we need to break down, right? Especially at a leadership capability. Nobody needs to be write ML code and be experts in AI. What you really need to do is be the translator in some sense. As long as those roles are understood really well, saying you're a translator, you're going to map AI to your strategic outcomes, be able to guide ethical decisions, come up with or create a culture where people can learn and train and function that way. I think that's the piece that probably helps a little bit with that change management.
Great question. We have a couple minutes left. One more quick question, right down the middle, I think. One more quick question, then we'll wrap up. Keep us on schedule. Yes, sir.
Tom, your panelists may be too young to have lived through what I'm going to ask.
So you're asking me because I'm old?
No. I want your panelists. So I lived through the internet transformation of the 1990s, and I'd like if they can briefly say, to the extent that they've read the history books, how they look at the AI transformation we're going through now compared to the internet transformation of, let's say, 30 years ago.
Great question. So all you young ladies, you want to go first?
Okay, all right. I thought you were going to take it.
No, I don't remember those. I'm too young.
I will say, this is how I think about it, Irving. I think about it this way. The internet took 7 years to get to 100 million users. And maybe my math and stats may be off, but let's call it that. And GPT took 2 months, 100 million users. This transformation, this inflection point is not linear, it's exponential. And I think some people reflect on that as a speed. You just got to get there faster. And yes, speed is an element, but it's actually exponentially different, right? So there's that. I'm going to butcher this example, so if anyone knows it, jump in here. But there is this physics example of Wembley Stadium, if anyone knows where that is, soccer fans, football fans out there, largest in the UK. And they talk about a drop of water at the pitch being done, and then a second drop of water a minute later, and then 4 drops and 8 drops, and you do that, compounding it. And they ask, how long does it take for the people at the first level to feel the splash of water? Well, it takes 49 minutes for the stadium to be flooded using that compounding effect, but they only feel the splash at minute 45, which at that point, there's only 4 minutes left. You cannot leave the stadium. It's too late. The point being, that's the exponential sense of this. So I do believe this inflection point is similar into what happened with the internet, but the pace, the velocity, everything else is just completely different. I don't know if you agree with that, Irving, but that's kind of my sense of it.
Yeah. Final
This
thoughts,
morning,
others?
I know, in the keynote, they spoke about computers taking over, right? PCs coming into an organization, and how it happened very slowly, but then every time you turned, there was a PC here, there was a PC there. You just didn't know it was happening around you. I think AI is very similar. It's happening in pockets. It's happening around you. You just don't know sometimes the extent to which it's happening. But I think conversations like this, bringing groups like this together, helps us see the possibility of, not just relying on our own intelligence, but to see, hey, what is that outcome that I didn't even think of was possible, right? So that's what I think, just to draw context.
Yeah, and for me, the lesson of the internet revolution, and God bless the people who make things like hair dye, right? Because estimates on age may be off. But for me, the big lesson is honestly about unintended consequences. That a lot of things came out of the internet revolution that we absolutely would not have anticipated. And when we're moving at exponential pace, to your point about you don't know the stadium's about to flood until the last minute, we have some data on what stadiums have flooded and in what ways. And if we don't pay attention to it kind of right now, we don't know. We might be at minute 37.
Thanks for that question, Irving. And ladies, thank you so much. We started with basic definitions to set some context for education. And we talked about evolving from predicting to creating and generating to solving and acting. We talked about culture and roles and setting expectations and varsity versus junior varsity. And the context of the last question we had was things are moving fast. And we've got to move fast, but we need to move smartly. And educating people and driving those behaviors we want is really, really important. So hopefully that was informative. You learned a couple things. I certainly did. And congratulations, ladies, on your continued success. And thanks for participating in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.